They say time heals all wounds, but whoever said that never had to carry a secret like mine for 70 years. Most days now I sit by the window in my little cottage, knitting with my hands and letting the afternoon sun pour in like honey across the table. It's quiet here, peaceful even. I bake on Sundays. I feed the birds every morning, and every evening I light a candle beside the photo of my daughter. To anyone who visits, I'm just another sweet old lady who makes good lemon cake and hums hymns when she thinks no one's listening. But I know better. Because the truth is, my peace is paper thin. Sometimes I wake up gasping, not from a nightmare, but from the sudden silence that follows it. I hear voices that aren't there. My cousin's voice, my father's, and sometimes hers, the woman who saved me. I was 13 the year they told me I'd become a wife. I still had skinned knees and milk teeth that hadn't fully grown in. I thought marriage was something for grown-ups. For people who got to fall in love, not for girls who still played hopscotch behind the church with their little sisters. But in our town, small, dusty, and God-fearing, girls didn't get to choose. They called it family tradition, said it kept the bloodline pure. My mama wept silently while they braided my hair. My cousin grinned like he'd won a prize. And I disappeared that day. Not physically. I stood there in that lace dress and said the words they forced into my mouth, but inside, I vanished. What followed, the years in that house, the things he did to me, the silence of my mother, the rage of my father, all of it lived in the walls like rot. No one asked how I was. No one cared to notice when I stopped singing or eating or smiling. I was 13, and I was already forgotten. Until one day, someone saw me. She was a nun, an outsider, quiet and small and sharp as glass. She looked at me like I was human, like I wasn't some dirty thing the town had thrown in the basement of its conscience. And when I gave her my diary, the one I'd hidden beneath the floorboard, filled with the truths no one wanted to hear, she didn't look away. That was the day everything changed. They'll tell you this story is about tradition, or survival, or how things were just different back then. But I'm here to tell you the truth. The truth is, I was stolen, not kidnapped by a stranger, but taken by the very people who were supposed to love me, groomed by my own blood, betrayed by silence. And while the world kept turning, I grew up behind closed doors. I raised a child that wasn't mine by choice. I lost a sister. I lost myself. And for decades, I kept it all buried. Everyone believed the lie, but I lived it. And now I'm ready to tell it. Every awful, aching word of it. Because the truth matters, even if it's 70 years too late. I was born in 1941 in a narrow house on the edge of a town too small for secrets and too proud for shame. We didn't have much. But back then, no one really did. My mama was a seamstress. Quiet hands, kind eyes. My father worked the mills, and when the mills went dry, he drank. I had one little sister, Annie, who followed me around like a second shadow, always trying to keep up. We lived on faith and habit. Sundays were for church. Mondays were for keeping our heads down. And the rest of the week passed like a blur. Laundry, chores, the sound of the radio humming in the kitchen. We weren't poor in the way city folks talk about. We were country poor. We grew our own vegetables. We wore hand-me-downs until they split at the seams. I was 11 the first time I bled. Mama didn't say much, just handed me a rag and told me not to complain. But my father, he looked at me different after that. Not with kindness, with something else, something cold. As if I was no longer a child, just another debt to settle. And then there was Matthew. He was my cousin. Older by 3 years. Tall, square-jawed, with a way of smirking that made me feel small. He used to pinch me when no one was looking. Take things out of my school bag. Once, he held me down in the barn and whispered something so foul it made my skin crawl. But I was young, and I had no words for the things he made me feel. He came around more often after I turned 12, helping my father chop wood, sharing cigarettes with the menfolk, acting like he already owned something. I remember the way he watched me, like a fox watches a rabbit too slow to run. When Mama found out, she didn't scream. She just went pale and thin-lipped. I heard them arguing once after supper. "She's a child," Mama said. "She's a woman now," my father snapped. Then came the visit from the preacher. He talked about duty, about keeping the family close. Said it was God's will, that Matthew and I were meant to be, that this was a sacred bond. He laid his hand on my head like he was blessing me, but all I felt was heat and bile. I didn't understand it. Not really. I just knew that the world was shifting, and I didn't have a say in which way it turned. The wedding was small, just family, and those who wouldn't dare speak against my father. I wore Mama's old dress, too big in the waist, tight at the throat. Annie cried through the whole ceremony. I didn't. I just stared at the floor and counted the cracks in the church tiles. When Matthew kissed me, it felt like drowning. Afterwards, we moved into a side room of his parents' house, just a small attic with a creaky bed and one window that never opened quite right. He called it our place. I called it the end. The first night, I sat on the edge of the mattress, legs pressed together, hands shaking in my lap. He locked the door behind him, took off his belt slowly like he was unwrapping a gift. I won't tell you what happened next. Not in detail. Some things I've already told the diary, and that's enough. But I will say this. No one came when I screamed. The walls were thin, but the silence was thicker. And in that moment, 13 and alone, I realized the truth. I was never going to be saved. Not by my mother, not by God, not by anyone. From that night on, I stopped speaking unless I had to. I moved like a ghost. I scrubbed floors that weren't dirty. I kept my eyes on the ground. I was his wife in public, his property in private, and a stranger to myself. When I started missing my cycles, I didn't tell anyone. I didn't cry. I just wrapped my arms around my stomach and whispered, "I'm sorry," like the words could protect whatever had started to grow inside me. Sometimes I imagined running away, just slipping out the back door and never coming back. But I didn't know where to go. The world beyond our county lines was a mystery, and everyone I'd ever known had already betrayed me. So I stayed, and I waited, and I wrote. The diary became my only friend, a stolen notebook from Matthew's drawer filled with secrets I couldn't say aloud. I wrote every night by candlelight, tucked beneath a quilt that still smelled like my mama's lavender drawer. I wrote about Annie, about the boy I liked before Matthew, about the bruises, about the bleeding, and most of all, I wrote about how I wanted to disappear. Not die. Not really, but just vanish. Slip into the woods, grow old in some cabin far from here. Forget my name. Anything but this. But life doesn't let you go that easy, and neither did he. Winter came early that year. The leaves didn't even get a chance to change. They just shriveled and dropped like they were trying to escape too. By November, the attic was freezing. The walls cracked with the cold, and the little window frosted over at night. I remember wrapping my arms around my belly to keep warm, but it did nothing for the ice in my bones. I was almost 4 months along when his temper started turning from mean to monstrous. Matthew never needed a reason to get angry. Sometimes it was the way I walked. Other times it was how much salt I used on the eggs. He'd throw plates, call me names I won't repeat, then sit down like nothing happened. But something shifted when he realized I was carrying a baby. He said it like a threat. "You better not mess this up. My kid's gonna be strong, not weak like you." He didn't like me going outside anymore. Said the cold was bad for the baby. But I knew it wasn't about the weather. It was about control. He didn't want anyone seeing the bruises. One night I stood by the window and watched snow fall so softly it looked like feathers. And for a moment, I imagined myself somewhere else, anywhere else, somewhere warm, somewhere safe, somewhere I wasn't his. But the floor creaked behind me. He grabbed my wrist so tight I thought the bone would crack. threw me onto the bed and told me I was lucky he even kept me, that no one else would ever want me, that I was his and his alone. That night, I bled. I don't know if it was the baby or just my body giving up. I cried for the first time in months, quiet, gasping sobs into the pillow until the morning light spilled across the cracked ceiling. I told him. The bleeding. The pain. I thought maybe he'd soften. Maybe he'd pretend to care. But he just grunted and said, "Then try again. Try again." Like I was just a mule that hadn't done its job right. Something inside me broke that day. Something that had still been holding on. Hope, maybe. Or whatever pieces of childhood I'd still had tucked inside me. They shattered. Fell away. I wasn't a girl anymore. I wasn't a wife. I wasn't even a person. I was just broken. I stopped writing for a while. The diary stayed hidden beneath the floorboard, growing dust. My thoughts turned heavy and blank, like I was walking through fog every day. I barely noticed when Christmas came. The house filled with family and food and laughter, and I sat in the corner like a ghost, smiling when told and staying quiet when not. Annie came over that day. She was just 9, still all freckles and braids. She handed me a little ornament she'd made, a snowflake cut from cardboard covered in glitter. "So your room feels like winter magic," she said. And just like that, I remembered I wasn't alone. Not entirely. That night, I pulled the diary out again. I wrote about Annie, about her gift, about how maybe there was still something left in me worth saving. A week later, I met the nun. Her name was Sister Catherine. She'd come from a town up north to help at the local parish school. Young, but with tired eyes, like she'd already seen too much. I wasn't supposed to talk to her. Matthew didn't like meddling women, especially not ones in habits. But during church one Sunday, she found me in the back pew, sitting alone. I don't remember what she said exactly. Something simple, something kind. And it undid me. I cried, right there, in front of her, in front of the altar, in front of God and everyone. I cried so hard I couldn't breathe. And she didn't flinch. She just sat beside me and waited. After that, she started visiting. Just once a week. Said she wanted to bring me books, that it was part of her ministry. Matthew grumbled, but let her. I think he thought it made him look pious, but she saw. She saw through the plastered-on smile and the silence. One afternoon, while Matthew was out, she touched my hand and whispered, "I know." I don't know what gave me the courage, but I showed her the diary. She held it like it was sacred, read page after page without saying a word. When she finally looked up, there were tears in her eyes. And something else, a fire. "I can help you," she said. I didn't believe her. Not really. I'd been promised too many things. Heard too many lies, but still. I let her come back. The next week, she brought a coat. The week after that, a train schedule. The week after that, a plan. But we both knew. If we got caught, it wouldn't just be me who paid. The morning I left was colder than any winter I've known since. Not in temperature. The frost had started to melt by then, and the air smelled like wet soil and wood smoke. But inside, I felt frozen. Like my heart was a lake sealed over with ice, and every step I took threatened to crack it open. Sister Catherine came early, before the sun, before the rooster crowed, before Matthew woke up. She knocked 3 times softly like we'd planned. I'd packed only what I could carry. The diary, some cash she'd hidden in a prayer book for me, a dress I could run in, and Annie's glitter snowflake wrapped in cloth. I stood by the door for a long moment, my hand on the knob, wondering if this was truly happening, if I was strong enough. Then I heard him snore in the other room. That was all I needed. We didn't say a word as we walked, just the crunch of gravel underfoot, the creak of the old wooden gate, the silence of a town still asleep. The station was small, 1 bench, 1 lantern, and a sign so rusted the name of the town had nearly faded. There were only 2 trains a day. We caught the early one. As it pulled in, Sister Catherine pressed something into my palm, a small wooden cross. "Don't forget who you are," she whispered. I never saw her again. I rode that train for 4 hours, staring out the window, watching the world blur by, fields, trees, towns that didn't know me. I didn't cry, I didn't smile, I just breathed. For the first time in years, I breathed without fear. I ended up in a town called Pine Hollow, quiet, green. It smelled like apples and chimney smoke. The convent there took me in under a false name, said I was an orphan, which I suppose was true in a way. The sisters were kind, genuinely kind. No one raised their voice. No one grabbed my arm or watched me change clothes. They gave me a room with a small bed and a window, and for the first few nights, I slept on the floor. Habit dies hard. I didn't talk much. My voice felt foreign, rusted from disuse. But the nuns didn't push. They let me sit in the chapel alone. Let me clean dishes until my hands were raw. Let me cry in the garden when I thought no one was looking. And slowly, I began to return to myself. I stayed at the convent for 3 years. During that time, I learned to sew like my mother had. I read every book in their tiny library. I began to laugh again, small chuckles at first, then full belly laughs that startled me. But even in peace, the past lingered. I never forgot the child I'd lost, or the child I might still be carrying when I ran. I never found out. My body bled for days after I left, but I never saw a doctor. The pain came and went. I buried that part of me the same way I'd buried the diary, deep, silent, and sacred. And I never forgot Annie. She was the only thing I missed. Every night I prayed for her. Every year I wondered, did she know I was gone? Did they tell her the truth? Did she think I died? Sometimes I imagined her running away too, finding me in some library years later. We'd embrace. She'd still be wearing those ribbon-tied shoes and humming off-key, but it never happened. And in time, I stopped waiting. Eventually, I moved out of the convent, took a job as a seamstress in a nearby town. A woman named Rose gave me a room to rent above her bakery. She was loud, funny, and never asked about my past. We became friends. She taught me how to knead dough and drink coffee too late at night. She reminded me what it felt like to be young. And that's when the secret started to grow again. Not just the one in the diary, but a new one. His name was Daniel. He worked down the street fixing radios and clocks, had the gentlest hands I'd ever seen. The first time he touched mine, I flinched, but he didn't pull away. He just waited, patient, kind. I told him the truth, not all of it, but enough. And he didn't look at me with pity. He looked at me like I was strong, like surviving what I had made me something more, not less. We got married quietly. No church, no lace dress. Just the two of us and a courthouse clerk who smelled like tobacco. And for the first time, I chose. I chose love. I chose life. I chose me. But I never told Daniel about the diary, never told him I still had nightmares, that sometimes, when he raised his voice without meaning to, I shrank inside like a child again. I never told him that I still saw Matthew's eyes in every mirror. Some truths are too heavy to say aloud, even when you finally feel safe. Years passed, like they always do. Dan and I made a quiet life together. He built things, shelves, fences, radios that hummed like old lullabies. And I sewed. Curtains, quilts, dresses for neighbor girls whose mamas couldn't afford store-bought ones. We were never rich, but we were warm. And after a while, I even started humming again. We tried for children, for years, but it never happened. The doctors said my body was healthy, but I knew better. I knew what had been taken, what had been damaged. Some injuries don't leave scars you can see, but they live deep in the bones, in the memory of a womb that never got to choose. Dan never blamed me. He just held me tighter every time we got another maybe next month. He'd kiss my hair and say, "You're everything I ever wanted anyway." And for a long while, I believed him. I let myself feel that maybe the world had finally turned in my favor, but I never forgot. I still kept the diary, moved it from place to place, always wrapped in Annie's snowflake, always hidden in a drawer beneath my sewing patterns. I never read it. Not once. But I couldn't throw it away either. It was the only thing that remembered what I survived. Sometimes I'd stare at the floorboards before bed and I'd hear his voice again, see my mother's blank eyes, taste the blood in my mouth from that first night. Time dulled the edges, sure, but it didn't erase the blade. And then, one day, the past came knocking. I was 56 when I got the letter. Plain envelope. No return address. Just my name, written in a shaky hand I didn't recognize. Inside was a single photo. It was of a girl, maybe 16. Freckles, long brown hair, a timid smile. She looked like me. Not the me I saw in the mirror, but the me I used to be. The girl who loved tree swings and hummingbird nests. But what chilled me wasn't her face. It was the note scrawled on the back. She's asking questions. No signature, no explanation. Just that. I stared at it for hours. My hands trembled. My heart thundered against my ribs like it was trying to break free. Who was she? How did someone know to find me, and why now? I didn't tell Dan. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But how do you explain something like that when you've spent a lifetime pretending it never happened? I tucked the photo away, told myself it was nothing, a mistake, a cruel joke. But something inside me knew better. I started watching the news more, listening for names, looking for faces, every teenager they showed, missing, runaway, foster kid. I stared too long. I went to the library, started searching old records, county birth certificates, church files, anything. And then I found her, in a yearbook. Small town school 2 states over, junior year, same brown hair, same hesitant smile. Her name was Emily. She'd been adopted as a baby. No birth certificate on file before that. Parents wouldn't talk. But I knew. I knew. I'd written about the second pregnancy in the diary. After the miscarriage, there was another. One I never told anyone about. Not even the nuns. I barely admitted it to myself. But there had been signs. Kicks, flutterings. Pain that felt like life trying to hold on. And I remembered the bleeding. Not the first time, but the second. Weeks after I left. I thought I'd lost her too. But maybe I hadn't. Maybe they took her from me. Maybe they knew. Maybe Matthew's family or the midwife or even someone from the convent had handled it in secret, covered it up, sold her, or placed her into someone else's arms like she was a parcel, not a person. I couldn't breathe. I felt like I was falling all over again. I had to know. I wrote to the school, posed as a genealogist, asked for alumni information, waited weeks, then months. And finally, I got a reply. She'd dropped out that year. No forwarding address. Gone again, just like me. I started dreaming of her, not as she was, but as a baby, swaddled, crying, or walking through snow, lost. Sometimes I saw her standing on the church steps, holding the diary, saying nothing, just staring. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, my hands clutching at my chest like I was trying to dig something out. Dan noticed. He asked if I was sick. I told him I was just tired. But the truth was, I'd been tired for 43 years. Tired of the silence, of the pretending, of the lies I let calcify into fact. So I did something I swore I never would. I opened the diary. It had been over 4 decades since I last touched it. The diary's cover was worn soft like an old glove. The pages smelled of dust, cedar, and something faintly metallic. Maybe the rust of dried ink or time itself. My hands shook as I opened it. Not because I was afraid of what I'd read, but because I already knew. Every word in there, every sentence was something I had lived. Something I had buried so deep that even my dreams were careful not to disturb it. But now, I had to disturb it. The first page made my breath catch. It was dated 3 days before my wedding. If I write this down, maybe I won't disappear completely. The entries were short at first, childlike. Fragments of thought, pieces of confusion, desperate questions with no one to answer them. Then, as the days turned to months, the handwriting grew erratic. Sharp slashes in the letters, tear stains that had never fully faded. The page about the first night was stuck to the next with the memory of grief. I read every word, every horror, every small defiance I'd forgotten. Like hiding my shoes so I couldn't be dragged to church or refusing to say his name out loud. And then I reached it. The entry. The one I'd blocked out completely. I felt her move tonight, just once, like she was saying hello or goodbye. I think she knows what's coming. And below it, in tiny, trembling letters, if they take her, I'll never forgive myself. I didn't remember writing it, but it was mine. It was always mine. I closed the book and sat in the dark for hours. Outside, the wind knocked gently against the window pane, like a child tapping to be let in, the same way it used to sound in the attic. I knew then that Emily, if she was Emily, had to know the truth, not just because she deserved it, but because I did. I had spent my entire life hiding from that girl. Now I needed to find her. The search wasn't easy. The school had no new information. The adoption records were sealed. The nun who might have known something had passed away years ago. Every door I tried to open was locked tight, like the world itself wanted this secret to stay buried. But then, one day it happened. A Tuesday. Dan was out in the yard fixing the fence, and I was doing what I'd done 1,000 times before, folding laundry, flipping through the local radio stations, and there it was, a name. Emily Rose Danner, local artist and youth counselor, will be showcasing her Unspoken Stories exhibit this Friday. I froze. Danner. That had been my grandmother's name, my mother's maiden name before she took my father's. The exhibit was being held just one town over, less than 40 minutes away. It felt impossible. It felt like fate. I went without telling Dan. I didn't know how to explain what I was doing or what I was hoping to find. The exhibit was in a library, modest, warm, with high windows and the smell of old books. I walked slowly, feeling out of place in my gray cardigan and worn flats. My knees ached and my hands trembled with each step. And then I saw her. Not in person. Not yet. I saw her in the paintings. Every canvas was different. Some bright and angry, others muted and soft. But all of them had girls. Girls in locked rooms, girls screaming into pillows, girls hiding behind curtains or holding blank pieces of paper with tears falling down their cheeks. And then one. A small, simple piece in the corner. It was a child's hand reaching up from under floorboards, a diary just out of reach. I gasped. She knew. She didn't know she knew, but she knew. That's when I heard her voice behind me. Most people don't notice that one. I turned. There she was. Not a ghost, not a memory, but flesh and blood. Her eyes were hazel like mine, her smile unsure. She looked at me like I was familiar, like a dream she couldn't place. And in that moment, I wanted to run. I wasn't ready, but I couldn't walk away again. So I said the only thing I could. "You're painting," I whispered. "The floorboards. That's real." She tilted her head. "What do you mean?" I reached into my purse, pulled out the photo she'd never seen, the one I'd kept all these years, her school picture. And then I handed her the diary. "It belonged to your mother." Her face changed, confusion, then fear, then something like recognition, buried deep in her bones. She didn't ask who I was. She knew. She didn't say a word at first, just stared at the diary in her hands like it was a living thing. Her fingers traced the worn edges, the frayed spine, the soft leather cover that had once been tucked under the floorboards of a locked attic. Then she looked up at me, and her voice, small, uncertain, broke the silence. "Are you saying you're my—" I nodded. I didn't cry. I thought I might. But in that moment, something steadier took over, something deeper than fear or pain. "Yes," I said. "I'm your mother." Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Her eyes brimmed with tears, and for a second I thought she might run. but instead she sat down on the nearest bench and just breathed. I sat beside her. The library was quiet. Only the ticking of the old wall clock filled the space between us. I didn't know until a few months ago, I began. I thought I lost you. I didn't even know you were born. They must have taken you, arranged something before I even woke up. Her hands trembled on the diary's cover. I always wondered, she whispered. I always felt like there was something missing. My adoptive parents, they were kind, but they never talked about it. The files were sealed. When I turned 18, I tried to find out more. There was nothing. No name, no birth hospital. Just blank lines. I wrote about you, I said, pointing to the diary. When I was still a girl myself, I didn't know who you'd become. I didn't even know if you were alive. But I prayed every night that you'd be safe, that you'd be loved. She blinked, wiping her cheek. That painting, she said slowly. The hand, the floorboard. I thought I made it up. Just a strange dream I had when I was little. I kept drawing it over and over. My therapist said it was symbolic, something subconscious. I nodded. It wasn't just a dream. She turned to me. What happened to you? And for the first time, I told her. All of it. Everything I've told you. And more. The attic. The silence. The rage. The betrayal of my own blood. The nun. The train ride. The years of not knowing. She listened without blinking. Her fingers clutched the diary like a lifeline. By the time I finished, it was nearly dark outside. The library staff had turned the lights off in the main room. Only a single lamp above us remained, casting a warm circle over our bench, like we were suspended in time. I'm so sorry, she whispered. No, I said softly. Don't you ever say that. You didn't do anything wrong. She looked at me for a long moment. I'm angry, she said, at what they did, at what you endured, at how they took that choice from both of us. I reached for her hand, and you have every right to be. We sat like that for a while. Two women who looked so much alike, strangers and family, both at once. Two halves of a story that had finally found each other. Then she said something I'll never forget. I think I've been painting your memories my whole life. It struck me like lightning, because she had. The rooms, the shadows, the silence, they were all there, etched into her art like echoes. I couldn't speak, I just nodded. Before we left, she asked if she could keep the diary. I smiled. It was always yours. We didn't hug, not then. It felt too fragile, too holy. But as she walked me to the door, she stopped, turned and said, Will you come back tomorrow? And I said, yes. I've been trying to come back for 50 years. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was afraid, but because something in me had shifted. The weight I'd carried for so long. It wasn't gone, but it wasn't mine alone anymore. Someone else knew the truth now, and she didn't run from it. The next morning, I told Dan everything. I'd stayed up all night thinking about it, wondering if the man who had held me through so many quiet winters could also hold this truth, the ugliest part of my past, the part I'd buried deeper than even my own name. He was sipping his coffee, reading the paper when I said it. There's something I need to tell you, something I should have told you a long time ago. He looked up, quietly. No judgment in his eyes, just concern. I told him about Matthew, about the marriage, the attic, the diary, the nun, and Emily. I expected shock, anger, maybe, or pain that I hadn't trusted him with it sooner, but instead, he just reached across the table and placed his hand over mine. You were a child, he said. You survived, and now you're healing. That's all I need to know. I cried harder than I had in years, because for the first time in my life, I was finally believed, not just heard, but believed. That same day, I returned to the library where Emily had set up her exhibit. She was waiting for me. We didn't speak much, just walked down the rows of paintings in silence. When we reached one of the floorboards, she said, I want to show them. Everyone. The truth. What do you mean? I asked. She turned to me, a determined fire in her eyes. I want to do a piece, a full installation, about your story, about what happened, about what you lived through. I want people to see it. I hesitated. For so long, my greatest fear had been being exposed, being questioned, laughed at, dismissed. But then I realized hiding had never kept me safe, and silence had only kept him safe. So I said, "Okay, tell them." The next few weeks moved quickly. Emily gathered sketches, interviewed me, recorded pieces of my story in my own voice. She even scanned parts of the diary to be displayed alongside her artwork. One wall would show a painted replica of the attic room. Another would recreate the floorboards. There'd be a small speaker playing my voice reading lines from the diary. Shaky, raw, real. And on the final wall, a portrait of me. Not as a girl, but as I am now. Old, weathered, still standing, still here. But before the exhibit opened, there was something else I had to do. Something I'd avoided for decades. I went back to that town. The house was still there, smaller than I remembered. The porch sagged. The paint had peeled off in long strips. No one answered the door but a woman from across the street. An old neighbor, maybe, said the last of the family had passed away years ago. Cancer took Matthew, she said. Nasty man, she added with a shrug. I didn't feel anything. No closure, no triumph, no justice. Just stillness. Like standing on a battlefield long after the war has ended, with nothing left but silence and the wind. I walked around to the back of the house. The barn was still standing, the trees taller now, and the attic window, the one that never opened right, was cracked just slightly, like a frozen breath. I knelt in the grass, not to pray, but to remember. That night, I told Emily everything I hadn't before, the things even the diary left out, the parts I'd edited, softened, buried, and she listened, not like a stranger, but like a daughter. The exhibit opened on a Friday evening. There were more people than I expected. Dozens. Some from the local paper, others from the art community, and a few who stood quietly in the corners, holding tissues, wiping their eyes. Survivors, I could tell. Emily stood by my side the whole time. She didn't push me to talk, just let me move at my own pace. The room was dim, lit by soft amber lights. Each piece had space to breathe, to ache. The attic installation was eerily exact. She'd recreated the shadows perfectly. The slant of the ceiling, the crooked window, even the faint water stains. People walked through it like they were stepping into memory. I watched one woman press her hand gently to the painted wall, her face crumpling as she whispered, "It was just like this." The diary pages were printed large, framed under glass. One entry, the one about the lost baby, had people frozen in front of it for minutes at a time. And then there was the audio. My voice, recorded one afternoon when it was raining. I'd read from the early entries, my tone calm but trembling. That voice echoed softly in the gallery, threading through each piece like breath through lungs. I kept my distance. I wasn't there for praise or pity. But halfway through the evening, a young girl, maybe 17, approached me. She looked nervous, fidgeting with the sleeve of her sweater. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said. I nodded, unsure what to say in return. She added, "I didn't know anyone else had gone through something like that. My stepfather." Her voice trailed off. I placed my hand over hers. "You're not alone," I whispered. "You never were." More people came. More whispered stories. A mother who'd run from her husband with her 3 kids in the middle of the night. A grandmother who confessed she'd lost her own sister to an arranged marriage when she was 15. The stories spilled like water finding cracks. And I realized maybe this was justice, not courts, not headlines, but truth, spoken, heard, held. Emily took the stage at the end of the night to say a few words. I stayed behind the crowd, watching her. She spoke with grace, strength, fire. "This exhibit is about more than what happened to one woman," she said. It's about what happens when silence is forced on girls too young to understand what's being taken from them. It's about the women who survive and the ones who don't. Then she looked right at me. And it's about reclaiming the voices that were buried under floorboards. They applauded. But I didn't hear the claps. I only heard my heartbeat. Steady, strong, present. After the event, Dan met me outside. He had a bouquet of wildflowers. His eyes were misty. "You did it," he said. I shook my head. We did. That night, for the first time in my life, I slept soundly. No dreams, no screams, just sleep. Days later, a reporter reached out. They wanted to write about the exhibit. About me, about Emily. I said yes. The story was published in local papers and then picked up by a national women's journal. Letters poured in, some handwritten, some emailed. Stories from strangers who felt seen for the first time. Stories from survivors whose pain had long been dismissed. And one letter came from Annie. I hadn't heard her name in nearly 50 years. Her handwriting hadn't changed, still rounded, still slanted, slightly left. I always knew you hadn't run away. I knew something was wrong, but I was too little to understand, and Mama, she never spoke of you again. I'm sorry. I should have looked for you sooner. The letter ended with a phone number. It took me 2 days to gather the courage to call. When I did, she answered on the second ring. All I said was, "Annie." She cried so hard she couldn't speak. I cried too. We talked for hours. Then again the next night, and the next. She's a grandmother now too, lives in Michigan, said she has a guest room, wants me to visit. I kept that snowflake, I told her. She laughed. I always hoped you would. The past had not vanished, but it had softened, its sharpest edges dulled by time and love and truth. Emily came over a few days later. She brought her portfolio and sat with me on the porch. We didn't talk much, just drank tea and watched the birds. Then she asked me something I hadn't expected. "Can I call you Mom?" I didn't answer right away. Tears came instead. And finally I said, "You always could." I'm 83 now. My hands ache in the morning. My steps are slower. I forget names sometimes. Where I left my reading glasses, the name of the neighbor's cat. But some things, I remember like they happened yesterday. The attic, the diary, the sound of the train pulling away. There are days I still wake up reaching for that girl. The one who stood in a lace dress at 13, heart pounding, mouth sewn shut by fear. I want to tell her, you make it out. You survive. You live a life you never thought you'd have. And sometimes, I think she hears me. Emily visits every Sunday now. We sit in the garden and drink tea while she tells me about her job, the teens she works with, the mural project she's starting at the youth center. She's become exactly what I never dared to imagine, whole. She calls me Mom without hesitation now, like it was always meant to be, like the universe paused for a while, but not forever. Last spring, she brought me a canvas. "I made something for you," she said. It was a portrait, not of the girl I was, but of me. Gray hair, lines around the mouth, eyes sharp with survival. In the background behind my shoulder, she painted a tiny hand reaching toward a floorboard, not as a ghost, but as a guide. "I wanted to show where I came from," she said, "not just biologically, but in strength. I keep it above my writing desk. Yes, I write now. Not just in the old diary, but on clean pages, fresh ones. I write letters to girls I'll never meet, girls still trapped in attics, still hiding bruises, still waiting for someone to knock 3 times and say, 'I see you.' I tell them, 'You are not the shame they made you carry.' I tell them, 'You are not what happened to you.' Dan passed last year. It was gentle, quiet. He fell asleep in his chair holding a book of poems I'd read to him once during a storm. I miss him every single day, but when I feel the wind shift through the trees, I swear he's there, listening, smiling. Annie and I talk weekly now. We share recipes and memories. I finally visited her last fall. We sat in her kitchen, 2 old women with teacups and decades between us, and just laughed. She showed me a photo of Mama, said she never stopped looking sad after I disappeared. I don't know what to feel about that. Some grief is too complicated for forgiveness, but I've made peace with not knowing all the answers. Some days, I still struggle. When the light slants just right across the floor, I see the shadow of a door that used to be locked. When someone raises their voice, I flinch before I remember I'm safe. The scars don't vanish, they just stop bleeding. The truth is, I lived too long pretending I didn't matter. That's what silence does. It convinces you that your pain is a burden, that your survival is shameful, that your voice is too broken to be heard. But now, people listen. The exhibit Emily made traveled to 5 cities last year. It's being turned into a book. Survivors write in. Families write in. Men too. Some who did harm and want to change. Some who carry the guilt of their silence. I read every letter. Sometimes I cry. Sometimes I just sit with them. Like a vigil. Like a witness. I think about that day in church. The day I first met Sister Catherine. The way she looked at me. Like I wasn't invisible. Like I was worth saving. She died before I could thank her. But maybe she knew. Maybe her hands were the first to pull me from the wreckage, so I could one day do the same for someone else. I light a candle for her every year on the anniversary of my escape, and for the baby I lost, and for the version of me that never got to grow up safe. Not every story gets a happy ending, but mine got a true one, and that's enough. Sometimes Emily asks if I ever want to go back to the town, just once to stand where it all began. I tell her no. That place isn't home. It never was. This is home. This porch, this breeze, this peace I built myself, this voice I finally use. I survived more than just a man. I survived silence. And now I speak, not for revenge, but for all the girls still waiting in the dark for someone to believe them. If you're listening, if you've made it this far, I want you to remember something. You are not a mistake. You are not what they called you. You are not what they did to you. You are the light under the floorboards, the page that wasn't torn out, the truth that survived. It took 60 years for my voice to matter, but I'm speaking now, and I'm not going quiet again.